Today we're going to start Pei Zion, that's 87. At the Mishnah. It's a new Mishnah. We take Hashem that's we're able to learn every day. It's most of our learning. We should have the base of Migdash immediately. The Mishnah says like this. Amra, let's say a woman says, a wife, she says, Kainam teinim va'anavim elu shani tayemes. It's forbidden to me to have figs and grapes. It's forbidden for me to taste figs and grapes. Okay, so the husband hears that. Kiyam lateinim. He says, oh yeah, that's good. I'm really happy you took that vow about the figs, but he doesn't say anything about the grapes. But he establishes the vow for the figs. So kulakayam. So then the entire vow is considered established.
Here they haven't translated as these figs and grapes. And before we had the discussion, when you did it to that item specifically, or was it like a general term that made a difference?
Right, that's a good point, good correction.
It
says these figs and these grapes. Okay. So once he establishes the partial vow, then the whole vow is established. Let's say the other way. Let's say he annuls the figs. So he annulled the partial vow. He didn't annul the whole vow, just the figs. It's not considered annulled until it's annulled also for the grapes. So it's easier to get the vow established than it is to get it annulled. Because if you establish part of it, then the whole vow is established. But if you annul part of it, then it's not fully annulled. Now, what we're not seeing here is it partially annulled? It says, it's not annulled until you also annul for the grapes. What about for the figs? You annulled the figs. Does it work? The Mishnah is vague. The Gemara is also going to be a little bit vague. And we'll have to come back based on two different versions of the Gemara to come back to answer this question. And when he annuls the partial part of the vow, is that part annulled? When he establishes part of the vow, the whole vow gets established. When he annuls part of the vow, I know the other part that he didn't annul is not annulled. The question is the part that he did annul. That's unclear so far. Amra, let's say she says, Kainam te'ena shani tayemes, vanava shani tayemes. Let's say she says, she takes a vow, a fig that I'm going to taste, and another vow for the grape that I'm going to taste, that's prohibited for it to taste, and Nedarim. Then that would be two separate vows. Because each one, I assume she said a kainam for each one, even though the Mishnah didn't spell that out. But we'll see in the Gemara that she took a vow separately for each one. Then those are two separate vows. At least the part that Shani Tayemes, she divided up. She didn't say Teinim V'Anavim. She didn't group it together.
So in this respect, the husband is different from the authority of the father. Did we not learn that the father, or when his daughter gets married, can annul all her vows?
Yeah, but over here,
we're banning that he be specific.
I'm not sure. I don't know if you see. I understand, yeah, but the problem over here is specifically because he's specific. That's why it's only that vow that he's specific about, or that part of the vow that he's specific about. If he would have said all your vows, then that could have been annulled, possibly. I mean, here we're not saying, what if he says, I'm annulling all your vows? He just said, I'm annulling the vow for this. It's the specific part that's making it only specific.
Like a week ago, you taught us, I just don't remember the outcome, that like when you don't say something, like establishes the vow.
Right.
And if you take to annul it, you have to say something. Like there was
right.
Like
Right. The silence.
Of which one was
right. So the you want to say
I don't remember.
no, it doesn't have to do with that because over here, I know if I wait till the end of the day, then the vow gets established.
Yes, it-
But if I establish it, then it gets established even before the end of the day, and then I can't annul it anymore. So here what we're saying is he established part of the vow. The whole vow gets established and there's no more annulling this vow, any part of it. If he annuls the part of the vow, then it's not fully annulled, even before the day's over.
And he will stay, and if he stays silent, though.
If they sound, then he has till the end of the day.
No, no, if he knows one part, then he stays silent the rest of the day, the other part will be.
Will be
automatically.
established there. The Gemara says, Mani Masnisin. Who's the author of our Mishnah? Rabbi Shmuel. It's the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. Tanya was taught in the Brisa, Ishi Kimenav Ishi Fereno. The husband, Isha, her husband, Ish, Shala, right? Isha, her husband establishes, and her husband annuls. Which means, Amra, if she said, she takes a vow that she's not going to have figs, she's not going to have grapes, she's not going to taste them. So, kiyam l'teinim, if he established the vow for the figs, kulakayim, it's just entirely established, exactly as we said in the Mishnah. Hafa l'teinim, it brings every time we turn a page.
Oh, yeah.
Hafa l'teinim. If it, I told you what I tell my students about in the Russian army, they were tired. They're very tired, but they would make them run. So they would run and they're tired and they would run. So some of them would fall asleep. So the only way to know who was asleep and while they were running, the only way to know who was asleep and who was awake was when they turned. But anyway, I say that like as we turn a page and I see like not everyone's turning. Okay, so we're saying that the Mishnah is Rabbi Shmuel. So far, it fits perfectly. Kulakayim. If he annuls part of it, he only annuls the figs. The Einam Mufar.
Lucky I
Actually-
turned the page.
On the app, you can't. No, that's Dr. Stein has the app.
Yeah.
So Hafalatain, if you annul the figs, then Einam Mufrad Shiyafar Ad Afla Nafim. It's not annulled until you also annul the grapes. Now, again, we have the same question. I mean, what he's saying is clear regarding the grapes, that he did not annul the grapes by annulling the figs. But what's unclear is what about the figs? The figs annulled. The Gemara doesn't tell me. Two Mishnayos that say, well, a Mishnah and a Brisa that have the same vagueness in it. Doesn't tell me what it's talking about. What it's, that one detail is being left out twice.
That possible that it'll be, both of them will be stated.
It could be that both of them are established.
Yeah, like both established. and then-
Annulling part of a vow could be is not annulling the vow at all. Maybe. Or it could be that you annul part of it and that part is annulled. It's just the grapes is not annulled.
Well,
And
that's
we
what I
can say
That's what it seems pretty clear to me.
is from the English translation. When it says it's not annulled until he annuls for the grapes, what does it say? It's not annulled. What is it's not annulled? The entire vow or just the grapes is not annulled?
Okay, yeah. So it says until he nullifies the vow with regards to grapes.
So what is the first part of that?
The
When
first
it says
part
it's not
is,
annulled, what is it?
Upheld her vow with regards to figs. The entire vow was upheld, but if he nullified it with regard to figs, it is not nullified until he blah blah blah.
So they also are vague. It's not nullified. They're not telling you what it's is. Is it's not, is it's the grapes or is it's the whole vow?
Yeah, that's what Bill Clinton.
Right.
But it's possible that so the positive is one thing and so the negative another.
It's clear that the negative mean to annul Negative means to negate, to take off the vow. To
Yeah, like I would
negate the vow, you have to do the whole, you have to annul the whole vow. And to establish the vow, even part of the vow is already established.
when you establish part, like
The whole vow, the whole part, the whole vow gets established.
and then when you
annul, it doesn't say, when you annul part of it, it's clear that the whole vow is not nullified. It's not annulled. Question is part of it annulled? The Gemara is not telling us. It's not telling us the, okay,
get one from the other, but
right. So that's the Rabbi Shmuel. Now Rabbi Akiva says, it says in the pasuk, Ishi Kimena Vishi Fireno. The husband establishes, the husband annuls. Ma Yikimeno Mimeno. The word Yikimeno has the word Kiyim in it, which means establish. And also has the word Menu in it, which means from it. So Ma Yikimeno Mimeno, just like establishing could be from it, which means partial. Just like establishing, you could establish the entire vow by establishing part of the vow. Also annulling, you can annul the entire vow by annulling part of the vow. Now, it's very clear that it doesn't say mimeno in the word yefireno, but he's learning it that it says it's right next to each other. It's going to have the same rules as yikimeno is going to have the same. Yefireno will have the same rules as yikimeno, which means part of it. Want it to be symmetrical.
Well, if he nullifies part of it, he has to be specific exactly what part he wants to nullify. Otherwise.
But it doesn't matter because when he nullifies part of it, the other part gets annulled also.
That I don't.
He took the strength out of the vow by annulling part of it. The whole vow gets annulled. That's Rabbi Akiva's view.
Today's nomenclature that might not apply. I see what you're saying.
Well, what he's viewing it as one package.
Right.
So it would work like this in contracts. You break one of the things, the whole contract, one of the conditions, the whole contract. So you don't just say like that. It's not true. Muslim will say that it has to specify each detail of those conditions if the whole contract will be up.
But a lot of times it has clauses.
It's complicated.
Like
By default, if
Constitution,
you
you can,
don't do this will happen.
each clauses. You know, I'm a little confused. Yesterday, we were talking about the importance of intention. And today, is this a continuation about intention, or is this a discussion about words? You know what I'm saying?
I would say this has to do with based on how we're going to study these verses, how we're going to understand the verse of Ishi Kimeno. I think this is the easy way out. This is just the technical halacha. Okay. Rabbi Shmuel responds to Rabbi Akiva. Sometimes in the Brises, you have more back and forth than you have in the Mishnayos. First of all, in the Mishnah, we didn't even have Rabbi Akiva. Didn't even mention his opinion. The Brises will give me more discussion. So Rabbi Akiva says no. It says if once you annul part of the vow, the whole vow gets annulled. Rabbi Shmuel responds, Miksiv Yafer Mimenu. Does it say Yafer Mimenu? It says Yefirenu. Yikimenu has the word menu in it. By the way, the mem is part of the word kiyim.
Yeah,
It's not part of the suffix. Right?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's there. And Rabbi Akiva, what does Rabbi Akiva say to that comment? It doesn't say Yafer Mimenu, it says Yefirenu. Rabbi Akiva, Makash Afar Lakama, that's just a hekesh, it's a juxtaposition. I'm not saying that the word is different. I'm saying that it says it right next to it. So we continue the same logic. Okay. So we have a machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. If you annul part of the vow, if the whole vow gets annulled. Amar Rabbi Chia Barabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia Barabba says the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia Barabba was this great student of Rabbi Yochanan. We had him brachas. He reviewed all of Rabbi Yochanan's teachings every 30 days. Rabbi Yochanan would correct him. Zu divrei Rabbi Yishmael v'Rabbi Akiva. What we just learned in the Brisa are two opinions of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. But the sages say, Makish hakama lahafara, that we do it exactly the opposite. We juxtapose establishing to annulling, which no one did yet. Mahafara, mashehefer, hefer. Just like when it comes to annulling, only what you've annulled is annulled, but not the other part. By the way, we've just now answered the question. Apparently, everyone agrees that when you annul part of a vow, that part is annulled. So when they annulled part of the vow with the figs, and not the date, and not the grapes, so the figs have yes been annulled. It's just the grapes that haven't been annulled. We've now just answered that question. So, but the Chachamim say, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the Chachamim say that just like when it comes to annulling, what you've annulled is annulled, what you haven't annulled is not. Afakama, also when it comes to establishing, mashikiyim kiyim, what you've established is good, and what you haven't established is not established. You establish only part of it. He juxtaposes, he puts it exactly the opposite. Okay, so we've answered. We've thrown in a third opinion, which we didn't have at all in the Mishnah or the Brisa, and we've also answered a question that we had in the Mishnah based on the Chachamim, because when you do this juxtaposition, you say this, we're going to learn this from that, then everyone has to agree to the first part, right? So what's the first part? What are we learning from? Everyone has to agree to that, and then he's going to learn to something else, which everyone disagrees to. What everyone is accepting is that when you annul part of a vow, only the part that you annulled gets annulled, not the other part. That seems everyone's accepting. Okay, so why didn't we just learn it like this when we started? I just could have said that that's the rule. You'll see later in the Gemara. The reason is because there's another girsa in this Gemara, which the Ran quotes, which goes exactly the opposite. And the girsa goes like this. Aval chachamim maimrim, but the sages say, ma hafara ma shehefer loy hufar, just like when you annul, if you annul part of the vow, it does not work, annulling part of the vow. Afakama mashikiyim laikiyim. Also, when it comes to establishing part of the vow does not work. You have to establish the whole vow. So the Chachamim have a position here which goes directly against what we said in the Mishnah, that if you establish part of the vow gets fully established. And so first of all, they're arguing on that. But what we're really seeing is where they're taking it from. That just like when you annul a vow, you can't annul just part of the vow. What you've done is nothing. That would go back to the figs. That if he annuls the figs and not the grapes, even the figs are not annulled. So according to this girsa of the Chachamim, it changes the pshat in the Mishnah. In other words, in the Mishnah, we didn't have any way of understanding what would be with the figs when he annuls. But when we learn the Chachamim, depending on which girsa we accept in the Chachamim, that's going to go back and explain what's going on with the figs. The Ran then says this is the girsa also of Rabbeinu Moshe Bar Nachman and Chaysav. This is the girsa of the Ramban. The Ramban has this girsa. Now, we haven't been discussing this, but in the back over here, have you seen what's going on here in the back of the Nedarim? You have the halachas of the Rif, halachas of the Ramban, and then the commentary of the Nemuti Yosef and the Ritva in the back. It's just and it's printed different than everything else.
We don't have that.
You have it all in the footnotes on the bottom. Okay. Is it in the back of this Gemara? Is this Gemara just?
You have these neat little summaries in the back.
Okay.
That's what makes it so good, so nice. Oh, that's
Okay, we have a new Mishnah. The Mishnah says, I'm sorry, I skipped the small piece of Gemara, important piece. Amar kainam te'ina. If she takes a vow from the fig, and then she takes a vow from the grape. So when he annuls part of it, part of it gets annulled. So he establishes part of it. That part gets established because it's considered two separate vows. Amar Rabba Masnisin Reb Shimon. Rabba says the Mishnah is the opinion of Reb Shimon. Shimon is, of course, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Damar ad sheyemer shvuah l'chol echad v'echad. He says like this, that if someone owes money to 5 people and they're claiming from him the money, he says, I take a vow, take an oath that I don't owe you, and you. So he says that that's only considered when they find out that he's lying. That was only considered one vow. He would have to say, I take an oath that I don't know you, take an oath that I don't know you, take an oath that I don't. But have to divide that up to be chayav 5 times. The sages argue on it. The sages say that no, that's considered 5 lies, 5 false oaths. Shimon says no, that's considered 1 false oath, because he didn't. The way it began, I take an oath, was only 1 time. So based on that, our Mishnah is following the view of Reb Shimon, that if he says, I'm taking a vow that I'm not going to have figs and dates and grapes, that's only considered 1 vow. He has to divide it up and say, I take a vow that I'm not going to have figs, take a vow that I'm not going to have grapes. Then it's going to be divided into 2 vows. That would be the view of Reb Shimon. Okay, now we start the new Mishnah. Yedei sheyesh nedarim. He says, I know that she took vows. But I didn't know that I'm allowed, being the husband, I didn't know that I'm allowed to annul it. So
We learned before that he has to the end of that day that he finds out that
yes, until the end of the day, right?
It's a full 24 hours. Plus that.
Okay. So he didn't know that he was able to annul it. So when the day that he figures this out, then Yafer, he's able to annul it that day. In other words, the knowledge that he had originally, that there was a vow, that's not considered the Yom Shammai. On the day that he only has 1 day from when he hears, right? He only has 1 day. He found out, then he has to run home. So yeah, what we're saying is that knowledge that he has about the vow is not considered enough of a knowledge that it would start the timer ticking, that he only has until nightfall to annul the vow. That does not start the timer. When he learns that he's able to annul it, that's when the timer starts. Just hearing the vow doesn't do it. Yedei ani sheyesh mefirim says, I know that I'm allowed to annul the vow. But I didn't know that this is one of those types of vows that I could annul. So is that considered that the timer started? Well, Reb Meir says that he cannot annul the vow. Chachamim say he can annul the vow. I said that very vague because it's highly complex here. Reb Meir says that he can't annul the vow. When can't he annul the vow? So there's 2 opinions here. On the day, you see, this is a little bit hard to understand, but one opinion here is that on the day that he heard the vow, he thinks that he can't annul it, but he annuls it anyway. I don't know why he would do that if he can't annul it. He said, oh, your vows should be annulled. But he doesn't think that this is a vow that could be annulled. So maybe what Reb Meir says is lo yafer, that it doesn't work. And then what would happen on the day that he finds out that he is able to annul it? It also doesn't work. So Reb Meir lo yafer would mean either time it doesn't work. Chachamim yafer, the Chacham say that it does work. But when do the Chachamim say that it does work? Does it mean originally on the day that they heard the vow, or does it mean on when he found out that he was able to annul it, that this was the type of a vow that he can annul? So the first opinion, there's two versions here in the Ran. First opinion says that the Chachamim say only originally can annul it. The Meir says he can't annul it at all. And the Chachamim say originally you could annul it, but not later on. There is another view over here. There's a second view, which seems to be a little bit easier. The second view is, and Reb Meir says that you can't annul it. He's talking about the second, the later on. This seems easier to understand. He heard the vow. He doesn't think that he can annul it. So he didn't annul it. If he would have annulled it, that would have been fine, but he didn't. So now, when he learns that he's able to annul it, Reb Meir says it's too late. Why is it too late? Because we're going to say that mixas yediyah, a partial knowledge, according to Reb Meir, is considered a full knowledge. So it's considered Yom Shammai, the day that he heard. When did he hear it? Back then. So now it's too late.
Partial was that he knew the vow had occurred, but he didn't know he could annul it.
He didn't know he could. He didn't know.
Or the partial part.
He knows that he can annul it, but he didn't know that this was considered the vows that he can annul. He knows that in general he can annul vows. He doesn't know that this is the type of vow that he can annul. So then he can only annul it on the day that he heard it. He heard a vow and he knows that he can annul vows. He just was missing one detail. If this was one of them. Right. Right. Then what would come out would be when the Chachamim say that Yafer, that he can annul it, what the Chachamim mean to say is that you can annul it even when he finds out, right? On the second time, even on that later, this is the Pasha Pshat in the Mishnah, that when he finds out that this is a type of vow that he could annul, then he's allowed to annul. Then he could annul it before also, but that's not considered. According to the Chachamim, basically what comes out, according to the Chachamim, we say that partial knowledge that you had when you heard the vow, but you thought it wasn't one of them, but you knew that you can annul, that's not considered anything. That's not considered Yom Shammai. Until you know that this is the type of vow that you can annul, then it's not considered that you heard the vow, and you have more time. The timer doesn't start until you know all the information. So it comes out, according to the second version, is that the Machlekes Reb Meir and the Chachamim is if we say mixas yediyah haviyediyah, partial knowledge, is that considered that you knew? Well, that's enough. You knew. You knew that you can annul vows. You heard you heard the vow. Then it's too late. That's Reb Meir's view. Chum say no. You're still missing a piece of information. It's not too late. Now the problem is we have to go back to the beginning of the Mishnah. We have machlekes here. What happens in the beginning when someone knows that that this is a vow, but he didn't know that he can annul it? So do we say that this is considered partial knowledge, or this is not partial knowledge? Everyone agrees to that. Everyone agrees that he's still able to annul it. So it must be sounds like it's following the Chachamim's view. So the question is, what switched in the beginning to the end? Okay, that's not so clear. We're going to see in the Gemara that we have two approaches to what the Gemara is about to say. The two approaches that we had to understanding the Mishnah, because the Mishnah is vague, that's going to be two approaches to the Gemara. For a minute, we have a contradiction. The Gemara quotes a discussion about someone that kills another person unintentionally. B'lei ra'is, without, how do they translate that? Without seeing or without like, without seeing. So if one person kills another person unintentionally, he has to go to exile. Now, when it says without seeing, prat l'suma, this is excluding a blind person. Why? Because we need that the person should be able to see, but he didn't see. And that's why he goes to exile. But if he would be blind and he didn't see him, so then there would be no exile. In other words, this halacha is obviously for someone that's able to see, because we say that he didn't see. Oh, it's not the cover. It's a what's implied by the words b'lei ra'is means that someone that's able to see but didn't see.
This reminded me of the dead person that is not allowed to notify Baal.
Right.
because they could never
Right. Yom Shemaya, we said, right? The day that he hears. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yehuda says that a blind person does not go to exile if he kills. Rabbi Meir says it's exactly the opposite. It's coming to tell me that it's including the blind person. It says if he doesn't see, and this is including the blind person that doesn't see, goes to exile. Okay, now, the Gemara does not explain the contradiction at all. There's no explanation there. All we know is that this is a question. So what is the question? So let's view it like this. According to Reb Meir, the blind person has a little bit of knowledge because he knows that there was someone there. He just didn't know exactly where he was because he couldn't see, but he can sense that someone is there. There's a little bit of knowledge. He just doesn't have precisely where the person is. And when he threw the axe or whatever he did, whatever he did that killed the person, so that's considered miktsas yediyah, partial knowledge. Now, is that considered that it's considered real knowledge? So, according to Reb Meir, we would say it includes the blind person, that's just like a regular person. Part of that now, look, you knew someone was there. You should have been more careful. Well, not you should have been more careful because anyone be chayav tell us. We're just saying that the blind person's awareness is good enough to be like a regular person. The partial knowledge, according to Reb Meir, is considered knowledge. Now, what does Reb Meir say by us? Reb Meir said then when he had partial knowledge about the vow, Reb Meir says that you can not annul it later. Why?
the opposite of the dead person. Because the dead person could be aware of the vow in another way, but since it says that he has to hear it,
Right.
he's
Right.
not allowed to nullify.
Right.
Even if he's aware another way.
Right.
Why-
And wait on the discussion with the blind person. We're going to see that there's other factors that are involved. But here, if we accept the first approach of the machlekes Reb Meir and the Chachamim in the Mishnah. If you remember, the first approach went like this: that Reb Meir says he can't annul it originally and he can't annul it later either. Lo yafer means he can never annul it. The husband can't annul it. At the beginning, he can't annul it because it's not considered Yom Shmaya because he didn't hear it. Later, it's not considered that it was the day that he heard because he didn't really know it. He can't annul it later because it's also not Yom Shmaya. Why? Because Reb Meir would say that miktsas yediyah, partial knowledge, is not considered knowledge. So you can never annul it. And the Chachamim say exactly the opposite. Some say that he can annul it originally. That's considered that he knew it already. That's considered that he knew it. Later on, he can't annul it. That's considered that he knew it before. So miktsas yediyah is considered complete yediyah. So you don't have the time later on because he already heard everything at the beginning. Talking about the vow that he knows that he knows that he can annul vows. He just doesn't know that this is that type of vow. So when he hears the vow, it's considered that he knew everything already. Later on, he can't annul it. What comes out is we're going to say that the Chachamim is really Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda is the one that always argues with Reb Meir. And now we have a contradiction between Reb Meir, and a contradiction between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda, and it goes like this. Reb Meir says that Miktsas Yediyah in the Mishnah, and by the vow, the Miktsas Yediyah is not Yediyah. It's not considered knowledge. But then when we have in the Bryce, so we have Reb Meir saying that a summa, a blind person, goes to Gullus, that's because Miktsas Yediyah, Havi Yediyah. He is aware that someone was there, and that's considered good enough. So is partial knowledge considered like knowledge? That's a contradiction in Reb Meir's view. Now let's go to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that a blind person doesn't go to exile because Miktsas Yediyah is not considered Yediyah, even though he was aware that the person was there, but he didn't really know specifically. That's not enough. So, but back in the Mishnah regarding vows, Rabbi Yehuda, it's not Rabbi Yehuda, it's the Chachamim, but we're going to say it's Rabbi Yehuda. He's going to say that Miktsas Yediyah is Havi Yediyah because he's allowed to Miktsas Yediyah. The partial is considered a awareness, and he's allowed to annul it. And he's not allowed to annul it on the he's not allowed to annul it on the second time. He was only allowed to annul it originally, because originally that was considered the full awareness, the full knowledge. So that's why later on he loses his chance. So when the Chamsei Yafer, they really mean that only originally, but not later. That was accepting the first view of how to learn the Mishnah. So there was a contradiction between both Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. If you accept the second view of how to learn the Mishnah, then according to Reb Meir, there's no contradiction here, because Reb Meir would say that you're not allowed to annul it later. That means Miktsas Yediyah lei havi Yediyah, Miktsas Yediyah havi Yediyah, because what you knew originally was everything. Later on, so that means that the timer starts, and you only have until nightfall of the first day, not when you find out later. And so therefore, a summa also goes to Gullus, because Miktsas Yediyah, partial knowledge, is considered knowledge. So Reb Meir fits perfectly. Problem is Rabbi Yehuda, the contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda, and that's the Gemara's question over here. Rabbi Yehuda would say, or the Chachamim in the Mishnah say, that partial knowledge is not knowledge, and therefore you can annul it even at the later date. What you knew before is nothing. And the problem is how does in the Brisa, when it says a blind person goes to exile, how come the Rabbi Yehuda says that a blind person doesn't go to exile if partial knowledge is considered knowledge? That should be enough. You should go to exile. So the contradiction would only be in Rabbi Yehuda. There's two ways of learning, because the Mishnah is vague and the Gemara is vague. So the Ran explains these two possibilities. So, okay. Right. Right.
Now it shows up at 9 o'clock. I just found out about. Who's going to argue with him? Who's going to fight with him? The only one who's going to fight with him is his wife.
Right.
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 She's the only one who's going to say, "Well, you missed the deadline. Sorry," but she doesn't know anything. She can just take out another.
Yeah.
If she really wants to keep this measure so badly,
Yeah.
okay, you know that, no problem. I'm taking a measure, right?
Right. Right. Let's assume that she took a vow,
and even more, she can through.
and now she's regretting or whatever and all of that. But she could go to a chacham. The chacham is whatever. She's maybe embarrassed, so she wants the husband to annul. Every day she doesn't want to show up in the show. You're here again. What did you? Okay, Amar Rava. So Rava answers this, there's really no question over here, because here we're dealing with psukim. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, we'll go through this. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Gaber Ritziach, when it comes to the murderer that killed by accident, or unintentionally rather, it says when he comes to his friend in the forest, Kol Davar Meyal Liyar, anything that could go into the forest, right? He comes into the forest. The blind person can go to the forest, so therefore the blind person would be included in the person that's going to exile. It's a regular person, right? You can walk, you can enter the forest, and these halachas apply to you. And if when the pasuk says without seeing, that's coming to include the blind person, Miyar nafkalei. I already knew the blind person was included because he enters the forest. Why do you have to tell me without seeing is including the blind person? I already had him. So Elish Mamina Bleres Prat Lasuma. So it must be that without seeing is excluding the blind person because he was included already. So these extra words must be removing him from that. Okay, now let's go the other way. That was the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Reb Meir Savar Ksiv B'Bli Das says unintentionally. Kol Davar Meida, anything that could have intention. The Summa Lav Bar Meida, and the Summa can't have intention. Okay, so the Summa, the blind person, because he can't, I guess, focus, so he can't kill intentionally with focus. So he's already excluded. And if you would say that without seeing is coming to exclude the blind person, because we'd only be including someone that could normally see, and now he's not seeing. So if you're saying that not seeing is excluding the blind person, I already knew that he was excluded. So rather, Meir would say that without seeing is coming to include the blind person, because otherwise he would have been excluded. The extra words are coming to include him. So basically, we can't put together, we can't create a contradiction between vows and Nedarim, because the Nedarim and murder, because the murder has special halachas based on the psukim. Let's leave it here.
Thank you, Lily.
Okay, thank you.